Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Katerina Karen. I'm the Senior Program Manager with CACID. I work with our Asia-related activities. I would like to warmly welcome you to this consultation. It is also my pleasure to remind you a little bit about the Zoom etiquette. We will not go into great details, but please remember to mute your microphone when you speak. And try to use the functions of Zoom as raised hand. If you want to speak, we will try to do our best to keep track of the sequence of questions. But if you raise hand, that makes our life much more easy. Also, please, if you have questions, it's much better to put them in chat. It's easier for us to keep track, and people can make questions immediately. With this, it is my pleasure to pass the microphone and the floor to Professor Bunimer, Senior Advisor with CACID.
Thank you. Thank you, Katerina. Thank you for the introduction. Katerina is our Senior Program Manager who handled the Asia program for the last 3 months, including Myanmar, and also have invested a great deal in preparing this gathering. Welcome, everyone. We're excited and eager to see you all on screen here and to welcome you to the Asia regional meeting on G20 Interfaith. As you all know, the G20 Interfaith will take place this year in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And previously, it's an annual meeting. And last year it was in Japan. The year before it was in Argentina. And next year it will be in Italy. And I think after that it's in India. Gathering of policymakers every year from the G20. And the G20 Interfaith gathering aimed at creating some momentum among faith-based organizations and policymakers. And at the end of it is really to put the voice of the faith-based and religious institution to policymakers about the current global issues that facing people around the world. This year is no exception. CACID, the center in Vienna, with the Interfaith Association and Alliance of Civilization, United Nations Alliance of Civilization, and the National Dialogue Committee in Saudi Arabia are 4 partners who are leading the work and the preparation for the G20 Interfaith in Riyadh that was planned physically in October 13 to 16, but now will be most likely will be virtually. Our meetings today is really here in the Asian context is really one of 6 regional meetings that we are organizing as partners in order to create a regional consultation to generate recommendations to be submitted, to be put together to the policymakers in the G20 in Riyadh this year. We have had one in Europe, we have had one in the Arab region, and we also have had one in Latin America and Argentina, and the Asia one is the 4th one, and is still coming one in Africa and one in Washington, DC. Those will be the 6 meetings, and each group is diverse, and they create working group based on the different theme. Our meeting here is for today and for tomorrow for 4 hours, 3.5 to 4 hours every day, and it will be mostly closed by selected group that were nominated by different partners, including CACID as well. This is the setting and this is the context. And I think I've been told that we are at least on different 10 time zones. So it's very challenging to bring everyone together. But we're very happy that you all both volunteer your time and took the time to be with us in this important gathering. And we'll try to do our best in order to be productive and also to the point of discussion. This is the larger context. I am sure you'll hear more about it from our two first speakers who represent the organizers. His Excellency Faisal bin Muammar, who is the Secretary General of CAICID right now in Saudi Arabia, but he's usually in Vienna with the center, and Catherine Marshall, who represents the Interfaith Association and also professor in Georgetown University, and also has lots of other hats, including the Berkeley Center, and many of us know her from many different areas. We'll start with His Excellency Faisal bin Muammar to give us the greeting from CAICID as well. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everybody from the city of Taif in Saudi Arabia. I happen to be spending my Eid holiday with my family, so I decided to join you just to greet all of you and to say hello to all of you. And we thank you on behalf of King Abdullah International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue. We are part of the organizing committee. We have an alliance with the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations and the Interfaith Association, represented by Dr. Cole and Dr. Catherine Marshall, and the committee, the Interfaith Committee in Saudi Arabia. So this is really part of the consultation, as Dr. Muhammad mentioned to you, and we are happy to be organizing jointly with our partners this regional consultation. As you know, G20 is very important summit since the Interfaith Forum started in many countries. And we just remember in CAICID that we started in Germany and then Argentina and then Japan, and hopefully this year physically in Saudi Arabia in order to defeat this pandemic. If we cannot defeat it, then we have to go virtual as we are doing now. Thanks to Zoom and thanks to the Wi-Fi, allow us to see you face to face, or at least virtually. This G20 Interfaith Forum provides an annual platform where networks of religiously linked and faith-inspired actors engage on global agenda within the broader frameworks of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and the host country, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia this year agenda. The input and the recommendations of all this consultation, it's going to be presented to the what do you call it, the major event which will happen hopefully between 13th to 16th of October in Riyadh, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And this is really for us one of the major milestone in the interfaith business. We were really looking for this meeting, and we did whatever we can with our partners to prepare for this event. And as Dr. Muhammad mentioned, we were doing almost 6 consultation from in different parts of the world. This is the largest consultation ever done during the Interfaith Forum. So this is very important for us. As I mentioned, the consultation will be presented to the experts and the religious actors to set priorities of topics for the region and to contribute to the development of policy recommendations. As you know, we are maybe in the interfaith forum, we tend to manage connecting religious leaders and religious institutions with policymakers. The topics, as Dr. Muhammad mentioned, the topics of the host country is going to be women and youth, empowering people by creating the condition in which all people, especially women and youth, can live, work, and thrive. Climate change, safeguarding the planet by fostering collective effort to protect our global commons. Technology shaping, and I don't have to go on this. I am not an expert in technology, but this is really one of the topic which will be discussed in the agenda of the host country. A number of consultations have been carried out with a diverse group of experts, as I mentioned, and we started with Asia, with the Arab world and Europe. Also, there is 3 tracks which will be addressed during this online consultation: education, youth, and women. Also, governance and faith, protecting the planet. This really, for us in CAICID, is one of the main objectives, is to discuss all these issues. I just will say, or I will brief you 1 minute about King Abdullah International Center, which was founded by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Republic of Austria, the Kingdom of Spain, and the Holy See. We have diverse boards from Muslims, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindus in our board, and we have an advisory council. I know that some of you are members of our advisory council. We've been working in different parts of the world. We created 5 platforms. One of the platforms in Myanmar, and we are working with different Asian groups. We are proud, or we are honored that we are working with some of you in different countries in Asia and in Southern Asia. We created the other platforms in Africa, and also there is an Arab platform, and there is different platforms. I remember also the Jewish Muslim platforms in Europe. So this is really one of the issues we are focusing in CAICID. We are 7 years old. We are hoping that to grow and to increase our business in the interfaith world. The CAICID is honored that we are part of this organizing committee. Hopefully will bring something to the G20 summit that will reflect this what do you call it, joint work between 4 of the most important organization in the interfaith business. Also, we are opening the door for the others to consult with them, as we are doing now. I don't want to take much of your time, but I would like, before I leave you, to say that we are sadly hit by what happened in Beirut last night, and we feel sorry for the Lebanese people. We pray to God that to save them and to save the whole world. What's happening in Beirut it was disaster last night. We couldn't sleep last night from the news coming from our brothers and sisters in Lebanon, in Beirut. They were shocked. The views which was brought by the media to tell you how important this work is, and we are supposed to move as quickly as we can to help good people in the world to be the one who is really influencing policy making and also social life and social fabric. It was very sad and very, we couldn't really, we send our best greeting to our members, our platforms members in Lebanon, and we stand with them. And also we stand with Dr. As-Sammak, who is our board member in KAICEED. Thank you very much. And I welcome Dr. Catherine Marshall, who is representing the Interfaith Association. And I welcome everybody participating with us in this important consultation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Your Excellency, for your introductory remark, for reiterating the importance of the work and the gathering, as well as reminding us with the objectives to produce those policy recommendations with the commitment from KAICEED and the partners to deliver them to policymakers as well. Thank you again, and also for the solidarity with the Lebanese, the message of solidarity with the Lebanese community and people. Catherine Marshall, the floor is yours. Please give us your greeting.
Good day to all. It's a great pleasure to see all of your faces on the screen. I'm bringing greetings from the G20 Interfaith Association, and I thought I would comment briefly on some issues of context and a few of process to set the scene a bit for the discussions that we'll have here. And we very much appreciate all of your participation and look forward very much to your insights and ideas and suggestions as we move forward. The G20 has become a very important part of the multilateral system. It arose, it's useful to remember, as an expansion in a sense of the G7 and G8, because its narrowness was seen as unsatisfactory. And it was very much in 2008 a response to the global financial crisis. And it really, in many senses, is simply a summit of major heads of state from the leading countries representing a large part of the world's economies and also populations. It relates clearly to the United Nations, the Security Council, to regional organizations, though often in informal ways. So the G20 is in a way an unusual organization. It has no permanent secretariat, therefore no sort of permanent, and the leadership passes very clearly from country to country. And in many ways, there is a troika that plays an important role. So this year, the troika is Japan, the 2019 host, Saudi Arabia, the 2020 host, and 2021 host, Italy. So the three have a particular role in setting agendas and looking forward. Around the G20, however, there has emerged a very complex set of bodies and institutions. So there are at this point 8 formal engagement groups representing women, youth, science, business, civil society, etc. So 8 formal groups, plus there are ministerial processes that meet periodically. This year, the government of Saudi Arabia has put a great deal of effort into having an outstanding G20 summit and defined a very bold agenda, which includes, His Excellency has focused on. So empowering, protecting the planet, and really the innovation looking forward. To an extent, of course, this has been turned upside down by the COVID crisis. And in many ways, the COVID crisis has taken over all of our lives, but also the G20 agenda. And it is both a distinctive issue, in other words, some of the issues around protecting global health, but also the associated issues. And I put particular emphasis on the economic side, that a lot of the major packages, the trillions, we're talking trillions of dollars, not billions, are in many ways, the G20 has them as a focal point, and people are looking to the G20 as the leader in bringing us out of the crisis. And as people are saying, and I've heard this also through the T20 meetings, the think tank part of the G20 engagement groups, that we're really looking at reimagining a future ahead that where we benefit from this awful crisis. Now, where does religion come in? So religion is not one of the formal engagement groups. So at this point has not had a formal seat at the table, but Brian Adams, who's part of the discussion today, and some of his colleagues in 2014, when Australia was the host, had the inspiration to bring together religious voices with the basic argument, and this is in a sense our core mission, to be at the table, to have a voice at the table. And so since 2014, there has been an interfaith forum associated with each of the G20 hosts. And it's led by a group that comes together each year that it represents several of the leading religious voices in the host country, but also the continuing effort, which is now the G20 Interfaith Association, which is an NGO, which is a body that has a continuing role. So our hope is that the G20 Interfaith will be recognized as a formal engagement group, because we think that these religious voices, both in their practical but also in their ethical and moral stance, belong at the policy tables. And so in order to do that, clearly there are two absolutely critical criteria. One is that they be broad and representative. And the second is that there are substantive recommendations and ideas and proposals coming out of the discussions that fit in many ways into the agenda as it's defined by the G20 host country and by the G20 leaders. So that is what we're doing here, is part of a complex process, which is both focused on this year and on the issues for this year, but which is also a continuing process. So to give you some examples of issues that have been a focus in the past, because we are in many ways building on the networks of networks, whether it's the network of religious and traditional peacemakers, CAICID's network, the religious freedom networks have important, some of the academic networks, the global network of global movement of religions for children, etc. But one of those has been the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which very much involves Indonesia. And so the idea is that the religious institutions, whether it's Pope Francis with Laudato Si, people working on the ground, etc., have a major voice and a major role in the protection of the world's rainforests, which is a critical issue for protecting the planet. Likewise, there are many religious networks and groups working on issues of trafficking, fighting trafficking. And so that has also been an issue in a number of different meetings in the past, and we see that as a continuing theme this year. We're looking for topics on which religious institutions have particular inputs, and in that sense, the issues of hate speech and concerns about discrimination against certain groups are a major focus of attention, which we think that the G20 leaders should be focusing on and should be looking to religious bodies for ideas and for inputs. And finally, I think none of us can ignore that there have been up to 1.5 billion children out of school, and the issues of going back to school and rethinking aspects of education from what we are learning through this process, where I think the topic of inequalities is the most dramatic, the most stark issue that comes out of the crisis so far. How do we in education focus both on social cohesion, but also on reaching people who are outside of the mainstream? And we see that again as a central moral, but also practical role that the religious voices have to bring. So in terms of process, there are many ideas coming. The Interfaith Association is basically in the process of establishing a series of continuing working groups that will go from year to year. In other words, this is not a one-off process, it's a continuing process. Dr. Muhammad has described it, and I fully agree that we're building a portfolio so that each of the briefs that are prepared, for example, we've been working on refugees and on food problems for some years, that each year these are improved and brought up to date with the issues that are immediately before us. So the issue is to take your ideas and to enlist you to continue working on the effort to build this network of networks, to draw what is strongest, most inspirational, but also most practical from the different religious activities, whether they're academic, policy, on the ground, lived religion, etc. So that's the bold, I think it's a very bold and ambitious agenda that we have before us, and we're looking forward very much to working with you in the 2 days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall, for the setting up the context historically for the G20 and also the history of the G20 Interfaith Initiative from 2014 with Brian Adams and on, and also for re-articulating the issues and the topics, and it, in many ways, synchronizing the expectation of what can come up from this and how can we utilize these global voices that we are trying to collect and connect with throughout the regional meeting. Thank you again. Thank you for both of you for your kind and opening remarks. Appreciate that. We will move, with your permission, into our expert and representative from the region. I want to say that both our criteria really for the speakers as well as for the participants here is not to have full representation of all Asia. You know, Asia or South Asia, it's a huge geographical area, and we cannot really hugely diverse, and it cannot be really represented in one meeting. So we try to move with the different contexts and different linkages based on the themes and the topics that we are dealing with. So with your permission, we'll start with the second section of the program, which is listening to our four speakers on different themes. The themes for the Asia regional meeting are protecting the planet, governance and peace and governance and security. And the third one is women and youth empowerment as well. Those are the three major themes. Obviously, COVID reality and the Corona situation is going to affect this discussion. So it's not excluded from that. We will start with the same order that we've shared with our panelists. I will not read the biography of all our 4 speakers. However, we will post them in the chat room. Katrina will help us do that, and then you can see and read the biography of the speakers as well. We'll start with Ambassador Ong King Yong, who is the Executive Deputy Chairman of the Raja Ratnam School of International Study at the Technological University in Singapore, and also former Secretary General of ASEAN, who was based in Jakarta between 2003 and 2008. We are honored to have you here and start our conversation. Just a gentle reminder that we want to leave some time for discussion with you. So please try to follow the 6 to 8 minutes rule that we shared with you. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad, Mr. Chairman, and to all our colleagues from across the region, both in Asia and elsewhere. I want to thank you for the organizers, including me in this important discussion. I wanted to just spend a few minutes to maybe sketch out the bigger picture that we have here in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN region, maybe a bit about Singapore later on. And then we can open the discussions after the rest of the speakers have finished in this panel. There are 3 things I want to first stress regarding Southeast Asia, where we have this regional organization called the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. The first thing is that we are very diverse. As you can imagine, we have 10 different member states. We have all kind of culture, all kind of religion, all kind of everything. So in the past 53 years or so, what the different member states have done is to try to find ways to cooperate and converge our differences. We accept that diversity is something you can't run away from, yeah, and it's best to make our efforts focus on managing this diversity and working together. So we have seen various activities at the regional level guided by the ASEAN Action Plan. We have an ambition to establish what we call an ASEAN community based on political security cooperation, economic integration, and social cultural development for our entire region. So diversity is here with us, and we have to learn how to respect each other and manage our differences. The second thing is that in our Southeast Asian region, the population is increasing. In many cases, the largest countries in our region, namely Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, are seeing increases in their respective population sizes. So as you look around, yeah, we are trying to manage our differences, but at the same time, the bigger countries, which are quite distinct from one another, Indonesia being the largest Muslim population in our region, and in fact, it has the largest Muslim population in the world as an independent nation. And Philippines, mostly Catholic, Christian. And in Vietnam, yeah, we have unofficially different religion, yeah, based on the Buddhist scenic background. Yeah, basically, originally, the Chinese folk religion, Buddhism, Taoism, and all those kind of faith that you imagine in the Chinese arena, China. So the 3 major countries in our grouping, they are trying their best to understand each other and to avoid actually having any difficulties in managing religious or faith issues. So until very recently, the religion and faith part of the association, the grouping, has not been really the center of any intensive official government activities. This arena is left very much to the non-governmental organizations, the individual faith communities, yeah. But the underlying approach is that we are all together in this grouping, and we should try to understand each other and minimize the differences which might come across when we talk about our respective religion and faith traditions. So interfaith work, to put it bluntly, is relatively new, a new area for ASEAN as an organization. But the good thing is that, and this is the third thing I want to talk about, in all our respective countries, member states of ASEAN, we have very strong national organizations, national policies, national practice across the society with regard to religion and our various faith. So over the past few decades, we have seen more and more interfaith activities at the very non-governmental level. And as far as possible, official agencies don't get involved or overly connected with this particular arena. However, due to the globalization, the digitalization that you see in Southeast Asia, more and more groups across our member states in Southeast Asia are connected, and they are actually actively cooperating with one another and doing various things across the region. As you might know, the Southeast Asian region is one of the most volatile territory on earth with regard to natural disaster. We have volcanic eruption, typhoon, we have earthquakes, and all those other kind of natural disaster. And in recent years, due to the increased connections and relationship among the different faith and religious groups in our region, such natural disaster activated many of the different faith and religious groups coming together to engage in what we call HADR, Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief. So in that respect, we have, through this kind of challenges, obtained much more understanding and developed stronger connectivity across the entire region. And the marvelous thing is that so far, apart from specific cases of extremism or radicalization in certain parts of our region, by and large, the population of the ASEAN countries are more appreciative of each other's faith and religious differences than maybe other regions in the world. So we are hopeful that these kind of conditions should continue, and more importantly, as the ASEAN governments involved continue their community building, more and more of the various faith groups, religious organizations will be looped into the community concept, and we can cooperate even more with one another. So that's the big picture. In the case of Singapore, we have a government that is seriously looking at faith and religious issues. This government in Singapore does not take any chances on anything that might cause social difficulties or instability. So there are many rules, many legislation, which ensure that the very multi-ethnic and multi-religious society in Singapore continue to have cohesion and harmony as we deal with the day-to-day economic and other challenges of nation building. So from time to time, we do get a bit more intensive debate in our media, in our government and non-government channels over what has happened about this or that. But overall, the guiding principle for the political leadership in Singapore is that there must be active engagement with all the ethnic and religious groups so that we can make sure that the understanding across all the different faith and religions, different ethnic groups are maintained well. And if there are difficulties, there are processes for resolving these difficulties. So it is an active government which does not take chances with regard to anything to do with social cohesion and harmony in the country. I would stop here, Mr. Chairman, and happy to elaborate more as we go along this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Ong, for your remarks, and for really, I picked up several points. The statement that we are in the ASEAN region still learning and need to enhance our learning in how to manage diversity in our region, but you also reiterated that it's a new area for the ASEAN as an intergovernmental organization, a new area of interfaith, and you also recommended and wished for further cooperation between the policymakers as well as the interfaith association in the region, as something from your experience looking at it. But overall, I think your message is a message of model of harmony, and that in the region, compared to other regions, you said there is less tension and less violence, and you mentioned the link, the limited link to CVE, the counter-violence extremism. But I think overall, you emphasize the cooperation model and the harmony model in terms of interfaith community in the region. And maybe that's, as I've been one time at least to Singapore, that's also confirmed with your description and sharing the lessons from Singapore. And you mentioned there are legislation around that. There is 2 questions in the chat room for you. If you can check them, we can come back later on to you once we hear our second speaker. And I hope that Dr. Aram, Vino Aram, is with us. Dr. Aram, are you with us?
Yes, she is. She is.
Excellent. Can you hear? I don't see her, but Dr. Aram, Vino Aram, is the director of the Shanti Ashram. She has been part of the Interfaith Dialogue for the last 20 years or more. I have known her and worked with her, as many of you have done as well, in the context of a child development initiative and peace education as well. And you could see from her brief bio that we have, she has widespread experience in the field of interfaith as well as faith-based and development initiative. She's also a board member of CAICID, and we're honored to have her address us this morning. Dr. Aram, the floor is yours. Please remember it's 6 to 8 minutes input. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Munima, and thank you also for indicating the time. I think I want to follow on the thought of Asian diversity. And I think if you go beyond ASEAN and you go across Asia, diversity is something that defines the character of this continent. I would like to look at the platform that the upcoming G20 Interfaith Forum is providing us to look in a little bit more deeply as to what could be a meaningful engagement between experts and faith leaders. in addressing shared issues. I think we are at a moment now where we have seen so many of our challenges are interconnected. I mean, we are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have seen how governance is interconnected to the way global agendas are aligned. We are beginning to see how there is a precipitation of the needs, but also the situation of already marginalized communities and communities that have not been included in development agendas of nations and regions. So I'd like to focus only on three things. One is what is the current experiencing in engaging religious leaders, faith-based organizations in development agendas. And just like in the ASEAN, I think also in South Asia, it's a new experience, even though on a day-to-day level, in terms of what the society experiences, religious life, religious cultural life is a very important and dominant part of the experience of people in South Asia. I want to reiterate that there have been moments in the last 20 years, maybe small windows of opportunity, where this has gone from a broad discussion of interfaith cooperation and engagement of faith communities to particular experiences. Let me take two examples. One that led to the incorporation and modification of law when it came to children, and the second is in the moment of the previous pandemic, which was not of the scale, but which caught global attention again, which is HIV. I think I want to use these two specific examples because it also showed mutual illiteracy and a lack of understanding of the potential that each of the actors could bring into national development agendas and regional cooperation frameworks. I think when the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and this is almost 20 years ago, when the Convention on the Rights of the Child was being developed and worked upon by the UN, the UN had invited faith leaders at the international level and had recommended similar exercises at the national level. And while we were successful in looking at broad principles, when it came to the nitty-gritties, I think we did not have consensus, but we also did not have, I think, the possibility of constructively challenging us on some of these issues. For example, child marriage, for example, gender issues. So I think that discomfort, it's not just lack of familiarity, but it's a lack of experience in dealing with issues where we might have different opinions and how we're able to discuss a different take on different issues. The second is during the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and that was a more positive story. We found that the government was very open to working with religious leaders and faith-based organizations. There was a practical need as well in India. I'll take the example of India. There was a practical need because when the HIV/AIDS pandemic affected many countries of the world, and India was on the top 3 of having people living with HIV, they needed a complementary role of faith-based organizations, especially in the area of care and support. And here, I think the principles were taken into practical action. And why do I say that? Because I think today, while we agree and we agree to position engagement of faith communities in broad governance agendas, these experiences actually propel us to more serious listening and more serious working together. There are two things that I would like to speak about, and that is from the viewpoint of religious communities and faith leaders. What is the invitation? Where does the invitation come from? How is this invitation generated so that a more equal conversation can happen on national development agendas? And this is something that I feel is an important thought to consider, because whenever it is at the invitation of the government, then the expectation is that religious communities and religious leaders have to respond to an already developed mandate. And this brings in some hesitation on the point of religious leaders and faith communities, because they feel it is not flexible enough or it is not accommodative enough to create shared agendas. So I think when we meet later for the G20 forum, but as we prepare in the regions, this idea of how do we generate shared agendas and how can this be more accommodative but also more expansive, to have agendas that can really affect people's lives and hence become shared agendas, is something that I would like to bring to this group. The second thing is also an everyday experience doesn't become an everyday experience in the way we implement programs. So while people are very comfortable in South Asia with anecdotes and experiences and references to socio-cultural religious practices, when it comes to the public domain and it comes to governmental initiatives, they feel that it is still restricted to a certain way of implementing programs. And so, if I may say, sometimes interfaith collaboration or engagement of faith leaders stops at the level of just being there to present agendas. It doesn't completely delve into the potential and the possibility of enriching practice on ground. I did listen into the previous speaker when he said in the area of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, there has been much more cooperation. In crises, in emergencies, there seems to be a convergence and a collaboration that is accelerated, and work is done. One on everyday issues. For example, one of the issues that we're going to discuss coming up to the summit is the gender issue. And here, law, deployment of resources, engagement of citizens, commitment of religious communities, all of them have to come together if we have to overcome some of the traditional gender divides that we've had in countries like mine, but I think globally, this is a global issue. And there I feel we have to go from a crisis mode to a more thought through long-term commitment in evolving policies and practices that can bring in both the particularities, but also can bring in new possibilities of overcoming. One of the things, for example, in India that has been very, very positive, and I was personally involved with the Ministry of Home Affairs, was how do we care for children in conflict areas? And here the faith communities came in a big way in both identifying but also providing the care framework, the continuum of care framework in the different states of India, where in early childhood and in childhood, faith communities and faith practices have a role to play. In conclusion, maybe 2 or 3 things, Professor Abnima. I know the panel will go on, but for me, the first one is beyond crisis, beyond emergencies, how can collaborative frameworks that are expansive and not only asking for feedbacks and tweaking, but expansive, be incorporated into the G20 working framework, and what can the forum offer to that? How can some issues that are long drawn, again, during the COVID pandemic has seen gets precipitated, like gender divides, care for the vulnerable. How can some of these issues, because care and support are common themes in inclusive development and the ethical frameworks of care, how can some of these themes be pursued in a long-term basis so that the forum and the engagement of faith communities can be meaningful, and it can also find practical presence in the lives of citizens? And the third, of course, is how do we prepare the environment for these conversations, for these analysis, so that when we meet, we are informed and supported with evidence, but also with expertise from the field. That will be my input, Professor Abnima.
Thank you, Dr. Aram, for your substance input and really for putting us on track, not only on the children and women or gender issue, but also complementing what Ambassador Ong put on from the policy level. I really want to highlight, if you allow me, a concept you use, the mutual illiteracy. I think, if we put it in many ways, in a nutshell, you managed to describe this gap between policymakers and faith-based organization and religious community in the ASEAN region. From your perspective, it needs more really long-term engagement, space that is symmetric, and not only based on top-down invitation that seem to be rigid in your reviews, but really to develop a shared agenda that reflects the concern and needs of the two sides, and not really to be captive agenda of one side. And I think the notion of going beyond the crisis intervention for long-term engagement is a major point you made. In particular, being able to deal with issues of gender, with issues of children, and other theme you mentioned as uncomfortable conversation, and needing to be able to go beyond the cooperative harmony model that only focus on these aspects. So thank you again. Appreciate your comment, and I hope you will be able to stay with us as well. So allow me please to move to our third speaker, who's also a dear friend and colleague from our community of interfaith and peace building, and also work with CAICID for several years now, Dr. Muhammad Hidayat Nur Wahid, Vice Chairman of the People Consultative Assembly of the Republic of Indonesia since 2014. So his work and leadership in parliamentary work and in the policy making also, and legislative, much appreciated. You can see his full bio in the chat. Dr. Wahid Nur Wahid, the floor is yours. Please remember the 6 minutes to 8 minute rule.
Thank you very much, Brother Muhammad Abu Nemer, and my brothers and sisters, all participants of this focus group discussion. Good morning, good afternoon, good day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Especially for our Secretary General, His Excellency Faisal Al-Muammar. Of course, every one of us thank to God that give us this ability for meeting each other, whether not directly but by virtual. But we hope that by such this condition, we can practice our role to discuss about the inclusive governance and the religion and governance and faith in ASEAN region, in order to give our contribution for holding the next G20 meeting in Riyadh in next October. And again, I would like to say thanks for start this meeting and inviting us to join this important discussion. And we hope that every one of us can give their best practices and their best experiences in order to come with a good contribution in next G20 meeting in Riyadh. Our special topic is about inclusive governance and religion, the rule of law and rights, and the religion. And especially for me, as mentioned by our brother Muhammad Abu Nemer, and politician and policymaker in House of Consultative Assembly in the Indonesian Parliament, and related also with our colleagues in Interfaith organizations, where that we understand well that we need the better and stronger bridging between every people and every organization, whether it is in parliament or other out of parliament, whether it's also in government, in order to come with what we call the harmony and one aim to come with good policy in dealing with the relation between the religions and the people and the states and the country, and the relation between the religion and another religion, embrace of religion with another embrace of religion. And me from Indonesia, you know, where that Indonesia is, as mentioned before by His Excellency Ambassador Kang Ong Yong, Indonesia is the biggest Muslim countries, and The second biggest countries related with religion, the first one, of course, India. And Indonesia is in ASEAN, as Southeast Asian nation, is the only country to be the member of G20. And by that, Indonesia can give its more rules and its more contribution for the better next meeting in G20 in Riyadh, especially in dealing with the issue of the religion and inclusive governance, and also the rule of law and the rights of the religion. Because you know well that we in Indonesia, we have 6 acknowledged religions, and we have our national ideology. It is about what called by Pancasila, the 5 pillars. And the first of the pillars about the belief in God, the belief in the only one God. The second one is about the humanity and justice. And the third one is about the unity of Indonesia. And the fourth one is the democracy. And the fifth one is about the social justice for all the people of Indonesia. And based these 5 pillars, Indonesia, where it is the country that the majority of them Muslim, by these 5 pillars, Indonesia has not become the theocratic country, but it become the democracy country. Give all Indonesian people, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim, whether they are Japanese or non-Japanese, they have the same rights in practicing their rights as the Indonesian citizen, in practicing their religion, in embracing their religion, in practicing their religion, and also with dealing with their rights in practicing their national activities, in political activities, in economical activities, in educational activities, and also in relation between people and other people, whether they are Muslim again or they are not Muslim. But all of us, not only in Indonesia, all of the citizens all over the world, and all of the religion, all of the embraces religion all over the world, nowadays are victims of the pandemic of virus COVID-19. But this pandemic, this virus COVID-19 in Indonesia, because of our good practicing of 5 pillars of Indonesian national ideology, we can make this pandemic, this COVID-19 virus, not as something to make the people to see other as their enemy, to look to other as they are not their brother, or they are not same nationality in Indonesia. We in Indonesia, because of the COVID-19, we practice what may be called by real practicing of religion. Yeah, the Muslim people, they come to the church, they come to the temple of Buddha, temple of Hindu, to help people to make secure of the temple, to clean the temple, and to avoid coming of the virus COVID-19 to the temples or also to the church. And these people come from Muslim organizations, maybe mass Muslim organization, maybe youth Muslim organization, or also come from Muslim political organization. They come to them and clean the church and make secure their church and the temple from the avoiding of COVID-19 virus. This is the real practicing of the religion in order to come in with a solution avoiding the spreading of COVID-19 virus. But in other side, before 5 days from now, Muslim, they have the holiday, Islamic holiday. It's what's so called by Idul Adha or Idul Kurban. People praying in mosques or also in the fields. But we find that into region, it's in Bali and also in Maluku. You know, well, that Bali is the majority of them are non-Muslim. They are Hindus, and in Maluku, especially in Ambon, the majority also from or maybe the 50% are Muslim and non-Muslim. But there in Maluku and also in Bali, where the majority is non-Muslim, they help Muslim people to practice and to succeeding. They worship to the God in the holiday of Muslim holiday in Idul Adha. It means again that we in such this condition that people afraid about the COVID-19, they can come with the understanding of the religion and practicing of the religion that make them as brothers, make them as one condition that they have to cooperate with other by the understanding of the religion, to help each other and to give their positive contribution for avoiding all of the people because of the dangerous of the COVID-19 virus. I want to say that this is other proof that actually there is the relation between understanding of the religion and good understanding of religion can come with a good practicing of cooperation and accepting each other, and by that will come that the religion, when it is accepted well by the government as the policy of the government, as the national ideology of government, can give the good impact for the practicing of good practicing religion and good practicing of citizenship in the country as it is in Indonesia. And I think the practice of Indonesia and the experience of Indonesia can also be spread to other countries, because we know well that by practicing democracy and practicing the religion well, it can also give a good relation between people, good relation between religion and nation, good relation between religion and country, and by that we can coming with the positive practice of religion in open in inclusive governance and also in inclusive citizens also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nur Wahid, for primarily really you giving us some general case studies of Indonesia and the way you see the role of religion in governance. Your input is really coming from the point I picked up was really Indonesian context as the context of living together as cooperation, and you gave two examples of Al-Adha as well as Eid al-Adha or the Adha celebration in Maluku in Mali for Muslim, and how interreligious cooperation dealing with COVID-19, churches and the mosques helping each other. But overall, I think you're emphasizing the model that you think exists and you like to promote in Indonesia, which is a model of the collaboration and harmony and living peacefully with each other. I maybe just one general question for you for later on to reflect on. I wanted to get more from you as a policymaker, somebody who has been many years and also heads a major political, in many ways, religious, as well with a faith-based religious identity. What would be 2-3 recommendations you can make or you advise us to make to the G20 leaders on issues of women, on issues of youth, on issues of environment, or in issues of peace and governance? From your own experience, what would be in the ASEAN context, not only Indonesia, but ASEAN context, very briefly, maybe even one recommendation you find it most useful for us to remember. So thank you for your input. Let me move to allow me to move to our last speaker, who's come really from academia. Dr. Diki Sofian is the core doctoral faculty in the Indonesian Consortium for Religious Studies, and also in the University of Gajah Mada, if I pronounce it correctly. And he basically teaches religion and the pluralism and also deal with ethnic minorities. And your voice is much needed in this panel as well. Dr. Sofian, the floor is yours. Please, 6 to 8 minutes. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Good morning all and good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. I'd just like to thank the organizer for this very fine invitation. I feel honored to participate in this discussion and meet familiar faces from last year in Tokyo. My organization, ICRS, recently concluded a 9-country collaborative research program, actually, on religion, public policy, and social transformation in Southeast Asia. And at that time, Professor Catherine Marshall was also heavily involved in that initiative, but also Kun Sombun from the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, who is also participating here in this forum. So as I reflect on the 3 questions that the panelists have been asked to reflect on, I'd like to share some portions of my thoughts and insights. I think the call for prayers is coming very soon, so I'm going to be very quick. From the outset, I think religion is sort of like the unusual suspect in many respects, when it comes to policy discussion and engagement. I think religious authorities, leaders, and faith communities are often not usually well informed and updated when it comes to specific laws, regulations, and much less international policy frameworks and all. But they are interested on things that revolve around freedom of religion and belief, because obviously these are some of the things that directly impact them in many different ways. I mean, in terms of going to masses, church services, praying in the mosque, wearing the veils, and so on. And we have done some studies on the religious limitations and restrictions imposed during this pandemic and how that has affected the ways in which people are re-examining the different, means of doing ritual activities, festivities, and so on and so forth. Secondly, policy making is a rather sort of secular process, and it's a very mondial, non-spiritual process, if you like, and hence this is where the uneasy relationship between religious leaders and faith communities with policy making is, even though sometimes faith communities and religious communities are the main subject of discussion of the laws and regulations and policies. So I think there are some of these issues in which we need to also think about as we are trying to expand our network and engage religious actors in our policy discussions and engagement. Because if you look at the Indonesian experience as well, some of the most contributive, organizations to the networks of schools, clinics, and hospitals are indeed religious organizations like Muhammadiyah, the Nahdlatul Ulama, and the Catholic groups, the Christian groups, and so on and so forth. So there are potentialities beyond the scope of the state that these organizations could provide in terms of the services and the institutions that they can build in terms of nation building and in terms of even increasing the level of educational performance of our students. And I think this is where sometimes we get messed up. This is and mixed up, with the predominance and preeminence of the secularization narrative. I think we tend to assume that religion is oftentimes retrogressive and not thinking ahead and so on and so forth. But in actual fact, many of the religious organizations in Southeast Asia have been quite positive in their contributions toward education, toward gender equality, toward this fight and struggle against corruption and so on and so forth, including, as what Professor Marshall earlier said, on the care for the environment. The Rainforest Initiative is just one among many of the initiatives taken by religious leaders on the issue of climate change mitigation. And as conservative as the Indonesian Council of Ulama is, they have issued fatwas on the prohibition of illegal logging, on disaster risk mitigation, on species extinction, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the organizations and experiences that we have seen and that we have noted throughout the years and decades of the existence of these engagements. In terms of the G20 and the need to sort of internationalize the engagement of religious actors, I do think that we need to focus much more on the freedom of religion or belief. And of course, this has been situated in the lack of awareness about what constitutes freedom, what constitutes religion and belief. In many countries, you know, religion and belief, like in Indonesia, have different categories, have different meanings and connotations. But the term freedom there also is quite problematic, because some countries with their constitutions and statutory laws and policies might say that they already have religious freedom, but when you look at their practice and when you look at how some of the marginalized communities and vulnerable communities, faith communities, have been treated, then you know that there is some either misinterpretation or misguidance in the application of the Constitution and statutory laws. One thing I'd just like to say is that we need to get over this idea about majority minority. I think this is a false categorization, false dichotomy that is often used by statesmen and leaders, and including academics and intellectuals. But I do believe that there is minoritization at many levels in many countries of the world. So with respect to the FORB, I think we are still confronting issues of blasphemy and religious defamation. And of course, this is at the expense of the so-called marginalized and vulnerable religious minorities. And so I think in that sense, the G20 needs to take a strong stance on FORB and try to advance the conversation forward to ensure inclusive and positive engagement between and among religious groups and faith communities in society. At the UN level, we have the UN Declaration on Human Rights. We have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We recently, in 2011, we have the United Nations Human Rights Council Resolution 1618 on combating intolerance, discrimination, stigmatization, and hate speeches. And in ASEAN, we also have the Article 22 in the ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights, which talks also about the combating intolerance, discrimination, and hate speeches. So my last appeal to this group is that it's a reflection of our recent 3-year program, which we did with the Ministry of Religious Affairs in Indonesia, together with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in London, which is to conclude a religious literacy program to promote social justice, harmony, and multiculturalism. And this was specifically catering to the religious extension officers, religion teachers, civil society activists, youth, and women leaders. I will be coming up with an academic paper on that, but if you're interested more in learning about that national program that we did with the ministry, I'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions and issues that arise. Thank you very much.
Dr. Muhammad, are you with us?
I'm sorry, I was speaking to myself, to my muted mic. Apology. Dr. Sufyan, I was saying thank you for your input because, as I said, you really related to the 3 themes that we dealt with. You focus on the problem of religious freedom and belief, and you put a high visibility on it in your talk, and you actually suggested to have it as a recommendation for the G20 policymaker to take a stand on that and be clear about it as well. You know, you also supported Dr. Aram and others about the gap that exists between the policymaker and the secular model versus the contribution of of faith-based organization, and you highlighted number of other faith-based organization, Muslim, Hindus, Buddhists in the region who made a contribution, a significant one, and the need to include them in a more systematic way. There is already, and my question to you, and there is also a number of questions put forward. You did not want to use minority majority. What terms would you use in terms of inclusion, in terms of dealing with that relationship? I would be interested in hearing from you about that. But thank you again. Thank you for all our speakers for the substance and the contribution. I want to honor the time. We do have about 10 minutes to 15 minutes. Maybe we'll take, because we started late for the panel, about 7 minutes. So we'll take about 10 to 12 minutes for discussion. I know there have been several questions to Dr. Ambassador Ong. I'll give 2 minutes to each of the speakers to respond to the questions. Dr. Aram had a question, and also regarding the international versus focus on regional and ad hoc. Dr. Ong had a number of questions about the ASEAN interfaith as well. And I posed 2 questions at least to our panelists, Dr. Sufyan and Dr. Noor Hidayat. So we'll go back to you, Ambassador Ong, please, 2 minutes so we can go to the small group work. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 2 questions posed to me are, number 1, is there a yearly interfaith initiative, or are there any yearly interfaith initiatives through ASEAN? As I mentioned just now, ASEAN has just, as a regional grouping, look at some of these interfaith relationship. So at the official level, we do not have what we call yearly interfaith initiatives. But over the past 5 decades since ASEAN have been around, there are many what we call informal people-to-people sector initiatives. And we have a thing called the ASEAN Foundation, which is a small mechanism, part of the ASEAN setup, which have started to look at organizing annual activities for young people from different faiths to share ideas and to work on various projects across the region. The second question is about whether there are religious leaders controlling national organization in Singapore. Well, the Singapore government position is that the religion is a private, non-official subject. So the religious leaders of the different faiths, they have their own organization to look after. And at the national level, the various religious leaders, they will speak on behalf of their respective faith communities from their own official capacities in the religious bodies that they belong to. But at the national level, the religious leaders, they will share their ideas and they will want to make policy recommendation through the various political office holder. In other words, the ministers or the members of parliament. The answer to your question is simply that religious leaders do not hold a national organization position in Singapore except through their respective faith community mechanism or organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for the example of the Asia Foundation for the Youth, as well for your response. Dr. Aram, would you like to comment on the question of the international versus ad hoc and regional? Seem to be some Go ahead.
Sure. I'll keep it short, Professor Abunimah, but I want to reiterate that these ad hoc arrangements come during crises. These ad hoc arrangements also come when challenges are big enough and requires cooperation. But let me use my minute to say why we should advance also uncomfortable conversations and long-term engagement. Because if we don't engage in the formal space and we don't engage beyond the ad hoc crisis approach, we won't be able to address some of the larger issues that determine inclusive development, but also, I think, the way we want to shape the future of our nations and regions. Gender, for example, refugees, for example, human security, for example. These cannot be left to ad hoc discussions. These are dimensions where government has to include the voices of every major stakeholder in the country. And therefore, I feel just like Singapore, India also is a secular country. Formally, we say religious organizations do their bit. We don't engage, but I think time has come wherein we find shared spaces to address these issues. We know there are small instruments now that have been brought alive and been created within the governance structures to work more formally with religious institutions. Like the Ministry for Home Affairs, for example, in India, has the National Foundation for Communal Harmony. We have small instruments like this. But the key point that I would like to make is time has come that we have to engage more substantively. Time has come for mutual literacy, and time has come for also the possibility of not just reacting to agendas, but creating agendas together. Otherwise, so many of these determinants, social determinants, will continue to fuel conflict, divisiveness, and the lack of an inclusive development. And we know the cost, the human cost of it in our societies. Thank you, Professor Abunimah.
Thank you, Dr. Aram. I think Paul Hedges from Singapore, who posed the question regarding the international and the regional. I hope you got a response there, but I invite you to expand on this important question. And I think Dr. Aram gave a good argument for why we cannot work only on the regional or the national, but to have also beyond that. Let's go to Dr. Hidayat Noor Wahid. Do you have any response regarding some of these questions, or the question I shared with you regarding your experience on policy? Dr. Wahid. You are muted.
Okay.
Yes,
okay,
now
okay.
you're good now. Good to go.
Thank you, brother. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, according to my experiences in relating with the policy and the practicing of understanding of religion and the issue that we have in one country and all countries and all over the world, it's recent with education, youth, women, the issue of genders, and the protecting also for the planet. Actually, when we come with the religion, not as something only for worshiping the God, but if you take it as something spiritual, spirit and spiritual, something maybe to call is internationally to be practiced, or internationally issues to be accepted because of its positive things. Then we can avoid the dichotomy between what we call the theocratic country and also the secular country. We can come with the policy that by the spirit of the religion that internationally accepted, we can deal with the issue of education, youth, women, gender, and also protecting the planet. Then I want to say that to come with such this good contribution and good relation, according to me, how to come with the spirit of the religion as it is accepted internationally by all of the communities all over the world. And by that, the policymaker, maybe they are in parliament, maybe they are in government, they come with the policies dealing with many issues by such this spirit. Thank you very much.
Dr. Abunimah?
Thank you, Dr. Wahid, Noor Wahid, for your comment and bringing the discussion back to the policy, and also sharing your input on that aspect. I hope you will have a chance also to give us some of this in the working group if you able to stay with us. Dr. Sufyan, you had a couple of questions related to you. You have 2 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the questions and responses. One is, the alternative to the idea of majority and minority dichotomy is just to call them simply as groups or communities. I mentioned earlier that although I would disagree with the sort of use of the false dichotomization, but I did offer the term minoritization, which I think is much more clearer in terms of the activity of some groups that are trying to minoritize other groups in society. And we've seen this in many different contexts in many different countries. And so I think there are drawbacks in the way we oftentimes use and categorize groups as being majority and minority. I mean, even academically speaking, scientifically speaking, we can argue that these dichotomizations are ahistorical, inaccurate, and oftentimes does not reflect the sort of dynamic nature of societies and communities, I mean, Indonesia used to be a predominantly Buddhist country, and then Hindu country, and then Muslim country, right? So it's never a static kind of end game to that. There was a question on Pancasila and whether it's still relevant as a state ideology. Well, I would say that it is still relevant and important for most of the Indonesians, but I think it has come under severe attack caused by the negative influences from transnational religious movements that are highly ideological and political. And so this has effectively undermined Pancasila. And if you look at the government officers and politicians, even they are increasingly becoming quite embarrassed to talk about Pancasila. I mean, one of the theses is that perhaps they're embarrassed to talk about the state ideology because of the past abuses during the Suharto days throughout his New Order regime. But there are also politics at play, I think, which has oftentimes forced Pancasila to be sidelined. I'd just like to reiterate my stance to say that the G20 needs to make a strong stand on the freedom of religion and belief. I think this covers the whole wide world, not just the G20 countries, but countries even beyond the G20. I think with the rise in populism and the rise in conservatism, we need to seriously think about policy infrastructures and legal frameworks to ensure that freedom of religion and or belief are secured and guaranteed in all of the countries that we are operating in. The last issue was on the religious literacy. I'll be happy to respond to some specific questions, but I'm working with Professor Paul Hedges there in the Journal of Religions, which hopefully will be coming out with a very clear picture of how our religious literacy program with the Ministry of Religious Affairs had been conducted. But essentially, this is really learning about religions. Yeah? So getting religious and faith communities together and learning from each other about the experiences, about the insights on how they manage their congregations and members and so on. And so it involved almost 1,000 religious extension officers, religion teachers, and also people doing research on religion under the Ministry of Religious Affairs. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sufyan. Again, I think your message is loud and clear regarding religious freedom. Understand you reiterated this is the third time, so thank you again. I want to highlight the fact that you have been working with Dr. Paul Hedges on this issue of literacy and policy, and how do you really bring this literacy into the policymaker circle. Definitely CAICID would be this will fit with what CAICID is interested in and working on as well, how to bridge the gap between policymakers and religious institutions. So would love to hear more about it maybe later on. Allow me to thank our esteemed guests and panelists for this enriching and engaging as well conversation. It also helps us, I hope, to come in and be ready more for the working group that will take place today after the break as well as tomorrow. I just want to highlight that we have number of people that I know in the group with us that they are well qualified facilitator, and I wish and I hope and I will ask them publicly here to help us focus the discussion in the small group on recommendation to be specific, as well as to go beyond, in many ways to go to the regional concern, but based on a national experience, and avoid going into local national politics and terminology and dynamics. That's an issue that I think would obstruct the work of this group. So talk about the national issues dynamic in Indonesia, in India, in Myanmar, in any place, but really with an eye, how can we benefit from it on a regional perspective? Dr. Tats Arai is with us, and Kriya Langputo is with us, and Paul Hedges, doctor, also with us, many other that I know in the group, Margaretha with us, who I hope you will help us all in your own groups to focus the discussion in that direction. Thank you all, and appreciate your contribution. And I bring it back to my colleague, Katarina, who will take us into break and I think some instruction to small groups. Katarina?
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Abunimar. Thank you, everyone. It was a very enriching discussion. In a few minutes, we will invite you to your working groups. You'll be prompted to accept the invitation to a corresponding working group. Please do accept this invitation. We've divided you into 3 working groups. One works on youth education and women, one on governance and faith, and one on environmental issues. We assigned you to a group in accordance with your choice that you communicated to us. In some cases, you forgot to mention your choice, and then we assigned you to a group where there was still space. If you are super unhappy with this assignment, please let us know. We will try to change it tomorrow. However, knowing all our facilitators and the highly qualified and super knowledgeable colleagues, I'm sure that every group will provide you with sufficient ground for discussion and a very, very, very lively work together. With this,
and also, Katarina, don't forget to mention tomorrow, if you want to see other groups, tomorrow you'll have another chance also to experience other groups, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Absolutely, if there is a wish to do so. However, the overwhelming majority of the participants clearly stated their preferences to the groups. There are like 5 to 10 people who forgot to mention their preferences, and then we worked our magic around it. What else did I want to mention? I wanted to mention that the discussions in the groups will be recorded, however, not streamed. So please keep it in mind, and all other rules and regulations of a normal Zoom meeting still applies. Use chat as often as possible. Do mute yourself. So far, we've been behaving very well. Thank you very much. And with this, we can go to